Hey, everybody, and welcome to TNMCoaching Unplugged. Thank you so much for coming back into this podcast. We're so grateful for you sharing our podcast with your community. We are getting a wonderful response, especially when it comes to the leadership, especially when it comes to growing your capacity to be conscious leader. And today's conversation is going to be linked to that. I'm joined with wonderful Sofie Fisker, that I know as Fee. Fee is a brilliant people and leadership strategist with incredible track record across different global organizations like Nestle, Arla Foods, Lego, Pleo. She brings not only a deep experience, but also a very human, grounded, and curious approach to leadership and human development. In this conversation, we're going to explore a variety of topics. This is one of these kind of coffee conversation when we dive into one thing and we go into another thing. It's going to be very interesting. We will be covering consciousness and leadership. We'll be talking about the fast-moving world and also how the teams are changing nowadays. We're going to dive also into the ethical challenges of AI in the workplace and also explore what does it mean to be centered, human, value-driven individual in today's fast-changing world. What I love about Fee, it's her ability to bring transformation and change whenever she works. She's quite a pioneer. She brings this fresh perspective. I love her warmth. I love her commitment to creating the strategies for the real people and not just framework on the paper. So I'm sure that you're going to enjoy this conversation. And if you're somebody who is struggling in navigating complexity and change, you're somebody who's looking for more meaning in the work life, you're looking for somebody who wants to be more successful and understand the world, this is the right conversation for you. So let's dive in. Fee, welcome so much and welcome and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Zoran. And thank you so much for the compliments. I wasn't prepared for that, so now I'm feeling all like readiest and
Yeah, my
I hope I can live up to it.
I know. Everybody reports that. If you look at the podcast before, when I do this, people are usually like, "Oh my God, can I live up to this expectation?" But it's true. I mean, you are who you are, and I really love to give a proper introduction for people so they can feel your energy from the get-go. So let's go from you, because people usually on this podcast, they ask me, but who is she? What brought her to this point of view? So I'm always asking me the same question. Your journey into leadership, into people development, into working with the teams, what inspired you and what brought you into this in your life? Anything about you that you feel it's significant for the audience to know when it comes to your life journey?
Yeah, so it's funny because I think I've reflected a lot about this, about a lot of people ask me, how do you end up in the people space as an example as well? And I don't think that it was actually not a choice I made when I was studying or anything like that. I kind of landed there, but I'll tell you more about that. But I think I've always been drawn to people, and I've always been very curious as a person about people and what drives people. Um, I remember when I was, very young in my school, the teachers would always put me in groups that didn't work. For some, and they put me there, and I remember my mom was actually quite frustrated about this because she's like, "Why does she have to solve the teacher's problem?" But I think in hindsight, I think the reason was that I was genuinely quite curious about how people contributing and what made them tick, already at a very young age. So I think that probably also made me practice the muscle. Later on, I was a dance teacher. I've been, doing a lot of sports where I also I was always motivated by seeing what makes people perform, what makes people thrive. So I think it's been natural in my upbringing. Um, Being somebody who is a catalyst to other people's growth or other people's potential, right? It genuinely satisfies me to see when other grow. So then I've been lucky to make this my living, right? I've landed in the people space, and I very much believe that you get drawn to situations and people that need you or need your value or your energy. And so that's it's been a flowing like development that I've put myself in situations where I could bring value, and very often that has been very, very closely linked to supporting people on their growth journey. So that's been my calling. I've had a lot of, now I'll tell you a funny story. I think people are always like, oh, you always help other people, and you're someone who is already always putting yourself in the middle of the people challenges and trying to help sort them out. And I do, and I genuinely get very motivated by that. And it's cost me a lot in therapy as well to figure out why I do that. I've I I've spent a lot of money on therapy to figure out why I always get much more drawn to other people's problems
Mm.
than, self-care or helping myself in certain situations. But I think after, now about 20 years career, I've learned to accept that it's just, this is who I am. This is what makes me thrive. And then I've learned some skills and taking the necessary breaks every once in a while to make sure that I also build my own energy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's important when you give her, I struggle with the same thing, Fee, giving, 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 and really caring about other people as a predominant motivator. And then how do you take care of yourself? And I'm sure that a lot of people who are from the HR, L&D, coaches, consultants, even leaders, they will struggle with the same thing, because simply sometimes you can care too much and not care about yourself, right? That's one of the key lessons that we need to learn.
Exactly. Yeah, I have so many like funny stories and examples of where I remember I was talking to my coach. I have an excellent coach who's helped me a lot throughout my career. And one time I had a situation where I was cooking for my kids. Um, and then there was a leader who was really in like a challenging dilemma, and they called me and they're like, "Oh, I really need to just spar with you around this." And I'm like, "Yep, do that." So I jump on the phone. I'm cooking at the same time. Our kids are kind of screaming in the background. Really horrible situation. Obviously, I burn everything, and it becomes a very messy situation. And those are one of the situations where you're like looking back and you're like, okay, maybe I need to learn that helping others can look a little bit different than jumping on being
Yeah.
Ben in the moment.
But thank you so much for sharing your heart so vividly and so openly and absolutely. And for your people for listening, helping others, it's also important, but helping yourself, it's amazing. So we talk about curious and conscious leaders. So let's go with this kind of curiosity and consciousness. For you, now when you work with so many different businesses and you move to different positions, how would you define conscious leadership? How and why do you think it's important for us nowadays to become a little bit more conscious, a little bit more awakened, a little bit more aware? What is the importance and significance for that in today's world, from your perspective?
I think I think there are a lot of things that are, well, we know that a lot of things are happening in the world right now, right? And complexity is increasing. I think a lot of leaders out there feel overwhelmed. To be honest, I remember I read a study not that long ago, and I think about like more than 60% of all leaders are considering leaving their leadership role because of burnout. And I was like, oh, that's really horrible that is. And then I also, I've worked with a lot of Gen Zs already, and I hear very often that I don't want to go into leadership roles because it's not worth it. Anyway, so I think there are forces happening in the world that's making leadership roles more difficult, and I think decisions are getting more difficult. You have more options, more opportunities, but also more responsibility in a number of different aspects, right? And what I mean by conscious leadership is understanding the choices that you're making and the impact that has. And it's not meaning like you've got the full analysis and data. It's actually much more internal. So for me, it's a lot about understanding what's important to you, what's your compass, being open about your compass when you make decisions, rationale for doing what you do, and then standing by it. To me, that's very much the essence of conscious leadership. And I think it can help make things easier for leaders if they have more consciousness about what's actually driving them in their decision making.
So for the leaders who listen to you, and not only leaders, but as I said, we have eclectic audience of people that say, "Oh, wow, I want that. I want to be able to be conscious. I want to be able to understand my choices and decisions. I want to be able to own them. But the world is going so fast, and I don't have time to do it." So, what do you think is the consideration or the method, or how do we get ourselves to give ourselves time and space to become a little bit more conscious?
I think there are different strategies that you can have, but I think one of them is to accept that you don't have control. I think a lot of leaders, and I've worked with so many of them, and I'm one of them as well, who is, in many situations, you really want to control how, you get to a certain result, or, how people behave in certain situations, things like that. There's a number of things that we would like to believe that we can control.
Right.
But the reality is that I think if you let go of needing to control other people, you can buy yourself the time and energy to actually look inwards about what is it actually that I believe, and then you can become curious, right? Instead of being controlling, you can be curious towards other people's reactions or responses to certain things.
I
I think,
love that. I love that. I love that. I think that we need to bookmark it a little bit here. We cannot rush through this. Letting go of control. I think that's one of the most important strategies, right? How do we let go of control to be able to have enough space to become curious about what we believe and think about certain situation, then express it back? I think that's really, really beautiful. So how do we, Fee, in your life, what happened, for example, to you to be able to let go of control? Because I struggle with this a lot myself. Sometimes I can let go, right, in my leadership capacity, and I can say I trust, and I let go. And sometimes I feel like, like you really want to hold it. How do you relate to this in your own life?
look, I think I struggle with the same, and I think a lot of it is down to consciousness, and again back to conscious leadership as well, right? Do you understand your own triggers? Why is it that I need control in this situation? What is it actually that's triggering me?
Right.
I've done a lot of coaching myself, and I do a lot of self-coaching as well, and like asking those small questions in situations where you can sense, oh, this urge is
Right.
coming. Being curious towards yourself and being curious towards, what is this need coming from, and is it real, or is it just an emotional response?
That's a
Quite
good thing.
often,
That's a good
quite
point.
often it's an emotional response, right?
I love that one, Fee. I love that. Is it real or is it just an emotional response? So becoming curious about yourself, really learning about yourself, because sometimes it's just an emotional response. It's not real.
No, and it's, we many of us who's worked a lot with emotions in the past, right? We know that emotions, they come and go, and sometimes allowing it just to sit with the emotion without having to actually act can be a very, very powerful leadership tool. And I think many of us are in like this fast-paced environment, and we want to respond quickly because
Right.
we see a world that's moving fast. We also
Mhm.
believe that we need to move fast, but actually sometimes we need to be counterintuitive. We need to see things move fast, but then we need to pause. And
Yeah.
it's this, I think that dynamic is really, really key to become more conscious, as a leader.
Yeah. And I would really love, again, audience to bookmark it, because when we come to the golden nuggets, as I call them in podcasts, I bookmark them, So despite of the speed of the world, and the world is going faster and faster, and as you said beautifully, we are in inertia because we believe we need to also catch up. That pausing, stillness, silence, gap, right?
Ex-
Breathing, presencing yourself in the very now
exactly.
will help you become much more conscious. Then you can choose,
Exactly.
right?
I think, I don't know, I'm sure many of the leaders listening here, have been struggling with, at least I've been struggling a lot with this, silence. And I really had to learn in my leadership, and I still am, had to learn to accept that silence, you know,
Mm.
brings a lot of, opportunity. It room for reflection, obviously, but it also allows room for other people to think and to contribute that you might not have had otherwise, right? So I think this ability to read situations and understand what is actually the, approach that I take that allow the space, and that you help other people gain the space that they can't get in this world.
Right.
How can you help facilitate that as a leader? I think that's key.
Yeah. That's a beautiful key. Thank you for that. And you also mentioned the ethical compass, the moral compass, the leadership compass, and I really love, I just want to unpack this a little bit. When you talk about the ethical compass, the inner guidance, inner compass, how would you explain this to the audience, and how do you live that in your own life?
So to me, I think ethics is a difficult thing, because ethics, we're shaped by our upbringing, and I think that means that the way we think about ethics very much is related to our own way of seeing the world, right? So of course it's subjective, so it's not like you can say this is
Mm.
what's morally right to do. But I think it's about being more holistic. For me, it's about being more holistic in your decision making. So for me, it's a lot about understanding. In businesses, we very much we quite often we optimize for financial outcomes, right? It's part of doing business, which you should, and it's not wrong. But sometimes we have to make decisions where there are other factors in play, where we need to question ourselves what is the right ethically thing to do. So for example, I was thinking about this the other day. I had an example once when I was leader, where one of my team members, I asked him to give us an example of how AI would be used. And it was the most amazing experience. He shows up to this all hands and he starts talking in Japanese. He's from South Africa. Yeah, obviously that was an AI functionality, but it looked so real. Um, and it was, it sounded like his voice. So it's quite amazing, and we're all sitting there and having a good laugh. But obviously, this started triggering a number of questions, because then we started talking about, well, if we didn't have to hire people based on location now for our sales team, maybe we could just hire them one place and then we can give them this functionality and all these things. So AI brings a lot of opportunity, but then also comes the questions. But what's the impact of doing that? What are the trade-offs? Does it mean we have to let go of the people we have in our organization? Does it mean that we are favoring some countries towards others? There's a number of implications that I think will arise with the technological development that I think is important that we allow space to consider.
Yeah, the ethical dilemmas are really big with the AI. Emergence of the AI, from my point of view, brought a lot of interesting dilemmas that we have to consider, that we have to think about. And one of the examples that you just gave, it's the one of many, many, many. So I know that you've been in tech recently, and then you're still kind of moving through the tech industry. You've been in a different industry. So you got into the tech. So what is your honest opinion about AI? What is it that if you and I were to have coffee and forget about the audience, and you and I are talking right now, like, what the heck is going on with the AI? What would you say to me? Is it something that you love, that you embrace? Is it something that you're worried about? Do you see the benefits? Do you see the obstacles? Do you see only opportunities? Do you see challenges? What is I'm curious about you, especially because you've been in tech industry. What is your take on all of this?
It's funny because when I've spoken to a number of engineers about AI, they're very skeptical. and and I think it's been very interesting, because I've seen the dynamic of, executives being super like, "Oh, we have to embrace AI, we have to move faster," and then I've seen a lot of engineers being like, "It's not going to solve the problem." But my personal opinion, I think it's twofold, and I wish I could tell you that I was, either or, but I think I am both. I am both. On one side, I am excited about the opportunities. I'm excited about, people. I come from the people background, right? And there's a lot of work that we can remove that doesn't bring value to the people in the business. But then again, example, right? We in my previous team, and I sometimes you can use these different technical support, but then suddenly you realize that actually that creates the dilemma of suddenly not, maybe you train AI to select in a way that you wouldn't have. Maybe I've learned recently that job seekers are starting to use AI to customize their applications, which means that they get through. And then it doesn't become about who's most qualified, but who's best at using AI. So it creates all these problems where I'm like, I'm not fully sure, because we don't understand it completely. I think many of us are unaware of what problems it can create in the future. And I think we will face things that we haven't faced before, that we need to, figure out how we, and I think, again, that's why I'm asking for the ethical compass, because I think our judgment capability and making decisions when the technical possibility is there, we need to think about that before we're in the situation, because otherwise we're in the situation and we're going to make bad decisions, or situations that are going to be damaging.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think that this ethical compass in decision making with the AI is super important. So how can we make the right choices for the future? And, I'm always thinking about younger audience as well. I'm thinking about our children. I'm thinking about what will our children think about us, because we are now pioneering that movement. So I have this conversation with myself. If my son or my daughter sit with me in 15 years and they tell me, but you were the ones at the beginning of the AI, when the AI just became rudimentary and you begin using it, what did you what did you think about? What was your consciousness at that moment in time? How did you make decisions and choices? So I'm always awakened, and I'm with you that a lot of the times the AI, especially when it comes to people perspective, can lift the heavy weight. We can really release a lot of unnecessary work, so we can become more creative, we can become more present, we can become more innovative, we can become more of
Exactly.
what we are supposed to become in our human capacity, right? Not only processing the data and doing the admin and managing the systems and processes. I think this is amazing, and at the same time we need to be wise. This is what I'm saying to myself and to everybody else. I'm like you, I'm in between. I'm not for, I'm not against. I'm using AI in the most beautiful way. I have a good relationship with it. I jokingly sometimes say, well, my bot is my new friend. But at the same time, I'm very consciously mindful around the dilemmas, around the choices, and around the ethical compass with how do we use this as a tool.
Yeah, exactly.
It's important for leaders to hear this, because you are absolutely right. The tech people, they're like a little bit more skeptical, and the front users, they're like, yay, let's go, right? So we need to kind of also
Exactly.
to think about it a little bit more deeply.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges, is that it's very hard for us to imagine what it looks like, in 10 years. And I think that brings certain uncertainty with, for me, I have two young girls, and they are growing up with it, and they are getting used to in school that that's just part of being in school, that they use AI. And, on my bad or my dark days, I'll think like, but do they even learn to think themselves? Like, do they, um, and those things. I'm like, but how does that affect, generations when they then grow up
Yeah.
continuously
Discern.
asking others to think for them? What does
Exactly.
that mean to their capacity? Um,
Debating,
so
discernment, critical thinking. What I like, for example, about
yeah,
school systems that I've been, like sometimes you debate, you're in dilemmas, you're stimulated to think, to express your opinion. You don't ask first, you think first, then you express, and then you engage. And I think it's important for us to train ourselves not to go immediately, okay, ask AI immediately without engaging our creative mind and our creative heart. So yeah, let's see what reality
it's
brings.
a bit of an experiment, right?
Different experimentally, and I think it's
Yeah.
important. I'm asking all the guests to be very honest with me, because I really want people to think about this topic. So you will see in every podcast, whoever comes, I'm always asking that question about AI because it's relevant. I also know that you are passionate about well-being, and you believe that well-being is really, really important, especially for the younger professionals. You mentioned that you work with the Z generation already. So how do we get people to include the wellness element into our business life? How do we get people nowadays to really have the strong consideration that us being healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, it's the essential need for all of us? And so tell me a little bit more about your passion for wellness.
Look, I think my passion is very much also, it comes from experiences where I haven't prioritized my well-being, and I've seen the impact of that. I'm a leader who has tried to be burned out. I've tried coming back to the workplace, tried seeing myself making poor decisions because of it. Right. So I've seen the consequences of my kids if I had a period of time where I wasn't prioritizing my well-being. Um, Luckily, I've kept myself conscious enough to actually see it, right, and to confront myself with it. Um, But I've, I think given my professionalism, I think I've seen so many struggle with their well-being, and it's not because, I think many organizations, they drive a lot of well-being programs. They allow flexibility, they allow they do well-being programs. We even, in Clio, when I was working there, we allowed free therapy for everyone. But again, it's a reactive measure to help people. So how do you prevent it? Like, how do you actually get to, how do you build cultures that where people, they take preventative action to take care of their health? And I think it comes back to, understanding, again, conscious and curiosity. I think that it comes back to the original theme. Is like, do you understand what is important for you to feel at peace and at ease? I think it differs for many of us. Some of us get very triggered by relationships, get very triggered by deadlines. Some of us get triggered by external factors and everything happening in the world. Do you have an environment in your organization where that's allowed, and it's allowed that people have the space to talk about what triggers them and the opportunity to get the support that they need, whatever that might be, right? So I think, again, it's complex. There's a complexity in well-being as well. And to me, the most important in creating well-being is to create an environment where it's safe to talk about. It's I think you can do a lot of, programs, but if you don't have an environment where it's okay to say I'm struggling,
Yeah.
people don't get the help that they need. And then people struggle in silence, and ultimately it will create much bigger problem that then you have to respond to.
Exactly. So, I'm so admiration that one of the companies you mentioned had the therapy as a free service, and, helping people to be honest and share and express, because sometimes, we believe that in the world of business, there is no space for vulnerability because we don't have enough openness, we don't have enough trust, and therefore we have to bite the bullet and show up as a courageous, strong, especially if the environment is driven by masculine energy and masculine presence, then there is no space for this. And I think that you're absolutely right. The essence of well-beingness, and it's our ability to be able to be fully honest around how we really feel, and then seek for support, and then take full responsibility. And I think that part of us being a adult human beings and working in a business, especially right now when it's stimulating, motivating, fast-paced, a lot of things are going on, is how can I exist within all of that with the full health and well-being? How can I be taking care of myself so that my family works, my kids work, my social systems, my friends, my everything that around me, my hobbies, my creative output are there, and I'm able to work. I think it's super important. And I think it's going to be more and more important. What I'm seeing now when I'm coaching and being with the organization, it's even more and more and more and more and more, right? For everybody.
Mental health, the biggest problems that we have to solve as organizations, or we have to solve for being having an environment where that's okay, and where we can offer the right support mechanisms. And it's challenging, right? It's because I think again, back to ethical dilemmas, it puts you in ethical dilemmas, because if you have, I've had team members that were struggling with anxiety and things like that. I struggle with it myself. And you come to work and you bring it to work, of course, you're a whole person. But how can you then, as an organization, provide the right level of support? Because you're not a therapist, or you're not, a doctor. So how can you then provide the safety and the space for people to come forward, and then allow them the flexibility to do what they need to do?
Yeah. It's a beautiful dilemma, isn't it? But I think that we're getting towards that, the humane organization, as we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. How can we create that sense of honesty, warmth, clarity, and create the new ecosystems who are much more susceptible to that? They don't need to do all the functions, as you said. They're not doctors or therapists, but they need to facilitate, people being able to take care of themselves, especially nowadays when we're all stretched in different directions.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sofie, we're wrapping up our conversation. You and I can talk for a very, very
Oh, wow.
long time.
Was it already 40 minutes?
we're getting to the
God,
20 minutes.
time flies.
How do you feel about this? How would you like to leave the audience with anything that you feel it's important for you to extend as call for action? Anything that you feel that it's important for people who are listening to take on board from you? Anything that you feel that you want them to play with or experience or explore? Something that comes naturally to you as a call for action. We always love to challenge our listeners a little bit.
I think most people that know me, they know that quite often I lead by questions. So I like to ask people questions that trigger their thinking. And what I would ask the audience to think about, now I assume that there's a lot of leaders listening here, is in a world, and we've talked a lot about complexity and the ethical dilemmas that appear, as complexity increases day by day, how can you be more conscious about your guiding principles? And how can you share those principles with those around you? Because I think I didn't mention this earlier, but we have a trust problem in organizations. Trust is decreasing a lot. I think it was like 20 percentage points or something like that, the last study that I saw. So really, people are losing faith in their leaders, which is scary and sad, in my opinion. And I think it comes from leaders are facing a lot more dilemmas in their leadership and complexity, and they lack consistency in how they behave. So my curiosity is, how can you be more conscious around your own compass that can help you guide, and that can help other people guide or guide other people to what to expect from you when you make decisions.
Thank you for that question. I'm just going to let it sit in. And then thank you so much for, two important statistics that you mentioned, the decrease of the trust. I didn't know about that. That's surprising and really, really challenging, that people are, decreasing. And also the other statistics that you mentioned, that the new generation doesn't want to take leadership job. It's too much work. So why would I do that?
So what do we do? Like, what does organizations look like in the future if we don't have anybody who wants to lead them?
I know. It's fascinating, right? It's very, very interesting. Like what we're facing right now on a society level, and how business and society merges together. What we are facing and what we need to resolve as you come to the ethical dilemmas is, for me, it's interesting. At least it's interesting. So I'm going to take you with these questions from Fee. Thank you so much, Fee, from ending up on inquiry, because it's a lovely way to end up the coaching broadcast as well, because we love asking questions. So thank you so much for being with me today. Thank you so much for having this lovely virtual coffee. As everybody else can see, there's a wealth of knowledge and experience from Fee. Please make sure that you follow her on LinkedIn and that you learn from her. She's one of these people that, it's authentic, real, and you can see this in a conversation with her. So once again, Fee, thank you. And once again, everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. Short and sweet, we have a perfect format, only 40 minutes. I know you're going to listen to this on your commute, in your car, share with your friends, colleagues, and family. I think it's really good. Sharing is caring. And you never know how this podcast is going to impact you and everybody else that you have, your inner circle and people that you care and love. Thank you once again for tuning in to TNM Coaching Unplugged, and bye for now.